I'm here at Innovate Australia with Derek Graham, and he is the founder of First Digital Capital. Derek, how are you today?
Oh, very well indeed. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Excellent. Tell us a little bit about your experience with blockchain and ICOs.
All right. So certainly I started about 2 years ago, which in blockchain years is about sort of somewhere between 12 and 18 years. It moves at such an extraordinary rate. So I first flew across to one of many conferences in Europe in probably the early part of last year, not far after I started the research. And I noticed what was happening at that time, which was so many ICOs coming onto the marketplace. That part of my learning indicated that virtually every person I spoke to at the conference had an ICO, initial coin offering. And I laughingly said, they're like belly buttons. Everyone's got an ICO. And it was about 3 months later when I went back to London this time, when I discovered there were a lot of funds getting created, FUNDs getting created. And I looked at that and thought, intriguing, but I don't necessarily want to invest in these. Entry fees, a minimum $500,000 US dollars. It was at that time I decided that we would create a fund of funds. And it's traditional hedge fund way of investing into an industry and getting spread across an entire industry. You invest in a fund. In turn, that professional fund based in their country invests in a number of underlying investments. Some might be ICOs, some might be currency exchange, some might be early equity. So we've created a fund of funds called First Digital Capital. What would it take me to mortgage my home to invest in one of these? Now, I'm not suggesting you do that, but that was the bar that I looked at setting. And if you could turn around and go, no, I really want to invest in this space, but I don't want one ICO to go down or one fund to go down, how do I do that? Well, you invest with spread across the entire economy of blockchain. First Digital Capital has reviewed 121 funds out of what's 270 or so worldwide at the moment. We continue to do it. We've gone down to 25, and now we've looked at the top 11. We've flown around the world and met them. Most of these funds are $250,000 US, $1 million US minimum entry fee, and they don't really want your money, not unless you're absolutely sure it's going to be patient money. And so when we looked at that, we realized that a fund of funds was truly the way to be able to invest in this space. So in other words, you were a fund that invest in the best funds in the world. The best way to mitigate risk is diversity, always. And so by diversifying across a number of funds, who in turn have diversity underneath them in what they're investing in. Fast forward 3 years, you'll see a number of funds that'll be in your superannuation that you could choose to invest with alternative assets, and they'll have blockchain exposure, I'm sure.
Fantastic. So much of a pleasure here, and so much learning just talking to you, Derek.
There's more to come.
It's time for Disruption 2.0. Definition of disruption. For a product or process to be disruptive, it must create a new market and transform an existing business model. True disruption alters a market or system forever, as my friend Jay. And here are some disruptive examples from the very simple, going through the Metal Ages to where we are now. The gramophone is a great example. It arguably created the music industry, which was then disrupted later through the web by Napster, iTunes, iPods, and now Spotify. More disruptions underway. This is to just give you a sense of how many places in society are being touched.
2.0 actually builds on the basis of the internet and the web. And now we have these multiple waves of technology arriving on our shores. Blockchain is leading them, but they also include things like artificial intelligence and robotics and drones and genetic modification. I mean, there's just so many disruptions occurring, but right now the one that's underpinning them, and it stands on the shoulders of the previous giants, Disruption 2.0.
A lot of people relate blockchain technology to cryptocurrency, but is blockchain a lot older than cryptocurrency?
Well, yes, it is, as we heard today. And if you actually went on the internet and read the original Bitcoin paper and went down to the references, you would find that they go back quite a long time to Dr. Stornetta's paper and others. Blockchain as a way to make data how do you say this? So you can't mess with it, right? That goes back many, many years. And then through the Bitcoin innovation, which is just the first application of blockchain, money is an application of blockchain.
What I've seen over the last 2 years since I got involved in blockchain, and in particular over the last 6 months, it's just insane. And I just came back from Hong Kong from a whole week there at the Cyber Center with one of the startups that I'm an advisor to. And you know, from the moment you get off the airplane, everybody's talking about blockchain. People are wearing t-shirts around like, you know, decentralize or die, or, you know, dabs and, you know, everything. You get to the hotel, you know, people getting off the lift, it's all about, you know, ICOs and how are we going to do this, how are we going to do that, let alone when you go to the actual incubators and accelerators. What's happening in this space is unprecedented. I've been involved in innovation for a long time, but what we see here today with what people like EOS are building, you know, Ethereum, Neo, all these big protocols, what's being built at this protocol layer is, in my opinion, the single biggest innovation that we'll see in our lifetime. So this brings me to the point, Web 3.0, you know, another one of those sexy words that people are throwing out there, blockchain and distributor layers and blah, blah, blah. I think for us to understand what Web 3.0 is, we kind of have to go back to Web 1.0, you know, when we actually dial in, remember? And it would take minutes to get a connection. I was still pretty young at that time, but I remember my mum going, "Get off that thing now, I can't use my phone." And it was, you know, amazing to see how that evolved into Web 2.0. People think about Bitcoin and related to blockchain, and cryptocurrencies as a whole is just the first use case of blockchain. You know, the underlying technology is totally different from what, you know, cryptocurrency is. Fiat currency system, centralized system, we all know how this works. Unfortunately, we've been burned by, you know, transactions taking days or weeks when you send them internationally. Basically, even the remittance world, when people are sending money back home and they're getting ripped off, being charged up to 20% of what they're sending home every month, and you know, those centralized units making all the profit. And how this works today, you know, truly distributed, truly open, and truly transparent for everyone.
I'm here with Juan Otero. He's a blockchain advisor and one of the speakers on the panel today. How are you, Juan?
Very good, thank you.
Excellent. Tell us a little bit about some of the knowledge that you shared on blockchain technology.
Yeah, so basically I was talking a bit about Web 3.0, how I've seen the evolution from, you know, the web that we had in the 90s, 1.0, to the explosion of the sharing economy and Web 2.0 that we have today, and how things are going to evolve thanks to blockchain mainly into that, you know, really real peer-to-peer, you know, distributed internet.
Excellent. So you're looking one step ahead from where we are now.
Basically, yeah, it's basically looking at the evolution and what impact the actual blockchain is going to have on the internet as we see it today, and how things are going to change, not just in terms of the transfer of information, but also the transfer of value that the blockchain and protocols like you know, Bitcoin or Ethereum are actually offering the internet users today.
And do you think Web 3.0 is going to come about with adoption?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest issues is UX. And we see this with cryptocurrencies from the moment that you want to set up your own wallet or you want to buy some Bitcoin or transfer to someone. The whole user experience is just, it's just not there. It's too complicated, too messy, too difficult. And this is probably one of the biggest challenges that we have. There's some really, really cool ideas out there, some really great technology. But until they can overcome the issue of the UX, in particular regarding payments, you know, they can't compete. Let's say, for example, a project I'm involved in, Travala.com, is trying to build a new Booking.com on the blockchain, but the actual payment process when you book a hotel room is just too complicated.
Perhaps also minimizing the fees?
Correct, yeah. I mean, the fees is probably one of the advantages. If you look, for example, at this Travala.com, the guys are charging zero commission, which means that prices could be, you know, anywhere between 15 and 20% lower than, you know, the likes of Expedia or Booking.com, which is the commission that they're charging the actual hotel owners. The transaction fees are a bit higher at the moment, but again, we have to remember that platforms like Ethereum, Neo, Bitcoin, they're startups at the end of the day, you know.
So once all these startup issues are ironed out, you reckon it'll be a much smoother sailing?
Absolutely, yeah.